Should you know how to code at all in AI engineering roles? How much is the overlap? People keep on saying that for some roles, you don't need to code at all. You don't need to understand software engineering. Do you agree with that thought?
If you're an aspiring AI engineer or anybody who's interested in working with AI, your easiest and most accessible tools to bring the most leverage to your work, to your company, to anything you're doing, is thinking about harness engineering as a system. That's, I think, the most valuable skill of 2026, 2027.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Shake Pods. So today we have with us Tom. Tom is currently engineer at Meta and he has worked for different startups in different industries, building and shipping AI solutions. Recently, Tom and I met in an event where he was a speaker and he talked about a lot of different stuff regarding agentic AI. How do we evaluate agents? And he's also building something very cool product called ClawBench that I let him talk about ClawBench, but it would be a very interesting conversation to learn from Tom about all the aspects of agentic AI, evaluations, harness engineering. So it will be interesting. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining us.
Thanks, Sohail. First of all, thanks for having me. No better way to spending Sunday than doing a pod. And yeah, as you've correctly said, we met at this event, which I think went quite well in terms of the demo that I did. And we just clicked from there. And all of a sudden I get this message. Would you like to record? I was like, yes, of course. I love myself on camera. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I remember bugging you with a lot of questions during your presentation and after the presentation as well. So I hope you didn't mind. And I thought it was interesting. So it would be interesting to record the conversation itself. So yeah. All right. So just give us a brief about yourself, how you started.
Yes, of course. So yeah, as you've correctly said, I'm a research engineer now, but that's only recently, since 5 months ago. Before that, it was mostly data science work with a mix of software engineering. And at some point, these two things kind of blended together and became what's called AI engineering, which is a relatively new term, which means that you're building solutions as well as running experiments and doing data science work. And yeah, worked in sort of large enterprises, in startups. There's very different cultures going on there, which to somebody who's maybe starting off, I would recommend trying out both because each of them teaches slightly different things. Startups is more about autonomy, about trying out different things, whereas enterprise is more about sharing knowledge and building scalable systems.
So I think AI engineering is a pretty new term and people keep on asking me, right? Whether do you need or should you know how to code at all in AI engineering roles? How much is the overlap? People keep on saying that for some roles, you don't need to code at all. You don't need to understand software engineering. Do you agree with that thought? I've seen some videos saying people who just know prompts and prompt engineering can be an AI engineer. What do you think about that thought?
It all very much depends what you're doing. I think you could argue that a data analyst does not need to know how to deploy software, but as I've said earlier, the lines are very much blurring, where if you know how to prompt, you also know how to deploy. And if you know how to deploy, that's software engineering to me. Yeah, the term is confusing. It can mean lots of different roles. But I think what the industry agrees on, it's specifically a person who works with LLMs. That's what it means, really, AI engineering, and deploys software with it, right? I think it's 90% software engineering, 10% AI work, roughly. So that's what my term would be. And that's what data science roles are slowly becoming because everyone is obsessed with LLMs and ML world is slowly becoming less relevant.
It's interesting, your career trajectory, right? So you have worked with startups, you have worked with the different industry companies, you have worked across different scale of companies. So what do you see the difference between these companies in terms of AI adoption? How quick are they? Do you see a cultural shift in adopting AI in these companies?
Yeah, of course. I think pretty much every single company right now is racing towards AI adoption, maximizing sort of, token maxing, as some people would say. Some are more lost than others, I would say. Some have a very clear vision, obviously the big tech. Some startups, if they find a market fit, they sort of know exactly what they're doing. But I think it's the companies in the middle that might feel a bit lost because they have these, fairly large numbers of employees. They have old workflows and they don't really know how to adapt quick enough because they still, they have clients who expect a certain level of quality and they're trying to replace it with AI. It might not be working out. So I think everyone's figuring it out. It's not super clear what the market is doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. Like companies, especially in finance and health,
Mm,
especially who have a lot of compliance around, they're
mhm,
actually figuring out how to make AI or integrate AI in such a way that the privacy and all the compliances are satisfied.
mhm,
So some industries and some companies are in that kind of industries where compliance is too heavy. So I think that's something that's slowing them down, which is not their fault as well.
mm,
But in companies where there is a lot of possibility for AI integration,
mm,
and I see some companies and some teams pushing back the change and seeing and fearing AI, saying that it's going to replace and take away their jobs. So, what do you think about that ideology of where, the market fear is there in such a way
mhm,
that big techs are or any companies are laying off people and blaming it on AI? Do you
mm.
think people should be very scared about AI,
Mm.
or do you think the pushback is correct?
Truth is somewhere in the middle. A lot of it is marketing and PR being pushed either sort of by the big token, right, the big companies who are actually selling the idea that you can drastically reduce your headcount with AI. But the actual reality of it is that you still do need software engineers
Yeah,
because you have these sort of gaps in agentic systems where you need a human to either add another layer on top or verify the outputs, which even Claude Code or systems like that cannot do reliably yet. And it's hard to make an agentic system sort of be responsible for a service being down because you can't really get the money back from Anthropic saying like, oh, your system, failed. It's part of the SLAs that you agree to, but you
yeah,
can make a person responsible for it. So that's
yeah.
how I think of it.
Yeah, I think the accountability is the major issue. I think
Mm,
or workflows has to have some human in the loop for the accountability
mm,
and making sure everything is right. All right. So you have been with NatWest as data
mm,
scientist for 2 years,
mm.
and then you have kind of switched to Meta or big tech as a research engineer in the span of 2 years. So, what's the biggest skill jump that you have acquired
Mhm.
for you to kind of transition into from data science to AI related role?
Just a slight correct. Actually, I went from NatWest to ITG, which was a marketing agency,
Okay.
where that transition from data science into AI engineer happened because
Okay.
it became less about doing sort of dashboards and reports and more about, hey, can we build a solution for our clients, Jaguar Land Rover, for example.
Right.
So I think when you start being responsible for like a website, an app, or a platform, that's when you start being an AI engineer, right? It's that sort of responsibility of being a full stack developer, but also being responsible for the LLMs, the prompts, the versioning, and all that kind of stuff. It's the combination of two. And then once you're an AI engineer, you either stay on the product side, right, or you go into research, which is what data science end game, always was. So once you become a data scientist, you naturally used to go to research, or you switch into engineering and then you build stuff. But you can also be building and researching at the same time. And the difference between the research and being just an engineer, like software engineer, I think it's the length of how long the projects take. When research, you could be trying out different methodologies, different systems, simply to test out whether this has any future potential. So you're doing lots of experiments, you're doing over a much longer period of time. I think AI engineering and making products is sort of, you may very much have to deliver something. Like it needs to be a working demo, which then becomes a product. It just has to work well enough, but not necessarily having to explore all the different possibilities of how a system can be improved and what makes it tick. So yeah, just different methodologies, I would say.
Okay. So you have acquired thinking in terms of systems, like that has made the transition from a data scientist to AI engineering, if I
Yeah,
have to summarize. All right.
exactly. It's systems thinking. Yeah.
Product that you have been building called ClawBench,
Mhm.
which is a community driven project. So
Mhm.
tell me a bit more about that and why community based project?
I think community-based is because the only users I get is people I meet in person, but maybe we're just too early on the journey. But yeah, to me, community is the sort of London community of OpenClaw enthusiasts, people who are building clankers, these little agents, and they're the ones who understand why ClawBench even needs to exist. And to summarize, ClawBench is a platform where you can submit your agents, for example, your personal agent, to get it tested, right? So you get it evaluated and see how well it performs on various tasks that you might be interested in. So imagine if you're using ChatGPT and if you ask it to do something quite tricky, for example, going on LinkedIn and, getting some information from it, it will simply refuse it, right?
Right.
And so the question then becomes, if you do want to use, I don't know, sort of web scraping or helping you write a blog or, coding or long horizon tasks or machine learning engineering, whatever it is that you're using your agent for, you want to see where it fails before you deploy it. And if you can see where it fails, you can then address it, fix it, and improve it. It arose from my sort of curiosity of when you have quite a few alternatives now as an agent user. You can be using something like OpenClaw or Hermes, as well as sort of managed and paid solutions such as Codex versus Claude Code. And there's so many debates on Twitter and LinkedIn about which one is best. Very few of these arguments are backed with actual data. So I think, I'd be very satisfied if ClawBench can bring clarity to users, to the community as well, of which tool is best and why, and help them improve it. Hence the competitive leaderboard and that part of the application. So that's where the community comes in, I think, is people can contribute, help out, as well as just test their agents and help themselves as well with it.
So the benchmarking and the scoring is
Mhm.
against publicly available data sets, right? So
Yeah.
where are these data sets there and where are this published and
Mm.
how is the Claude bench getting it?
Yeah. So right now I'm using a framework called Harbor, which is an evaluation framework, which already sets up a lot of the sort of the plumbing behind it, which is will be using the major benchmarks that major labs are using to evaluate their agents. So for example, TerminalBench, SWEBench, as well as I'm moving into sort of the web tasks, the ones I've described, for example, browsing LinkedIn, or can your agent go on Deliveroo and order a pizza to my house? That's an interesting one, right? Because
Yeah.
you think it's simple, but it's 5 steps and more than half of agents would fail, right? So I hope the audience begins to understand why this is an interesting proposition, because of course you can use Claude 4.7 and it will have the highest accuracy you can have. But what if you take a cheaper model, right, which costs you a fraction of the cost, and if you can improve it well enough on its weak points, that achieves the same performance as Opus, but, is much cheaper. So that's why we're introducing metrics such as like token efficiency, accuracy on long horizon tasks, and these sort of metrics to help users evaluate not just the model, but also the agent harness, which is, I think, a nice segue into the more technical parts of, what the industry is moving towards, which is what's called agent harness engineering, right? Where you have access to all these models, you can pick and choose, but it's not limited to just that. You also have available various harnesses. So to listeners, a harness is what goes around the model. So for example, Claude Code is the harness which goes around Opus, right, or Sonnet. So you can swap the models but keep the same harness, for example.
So, great definition about harness engineering, but we'll dive into deep about harness engineering later. But about the agents, so if let's say if I built an agent, or if someone in the community has built an agent, and let's say they have built it in their local and have deployed it somewhere. So how do I connect my agent to ClawBench and see how well it is performing? Like how does it work? Like the connection, integration, and all that stuff.
Yeah, excellent question. I think it's the major technical difficulty, right? Not difficulty, but the challenge of how do you replicate exactly what you have on your machine in its unique state and evaluate that specific instance of an agent in its current snapshot. And the way it currently works is that if the agent has access to curl commands to the web, it can simply reach out to the ClawBench server, register itself, and then be able to make commands and make tool calls against a benchmark, essentially through API calls. They get provided a question. The model then evaluates it, answers it, and sends us the answer. And we calculate the score, generate the traces, and the rest of it as a result.
Okay. Will there be any cost associated with the ClawBench usage, or how does the cost aspect works?
Yeah, because it's your agent hosted on your machine, which I don't have access to, or the API key, or anything like that, which is in a way nice because you have pretty much zero infrastructure set up. You don't need to set up any infrastructure to get it running. The API costs are on you, but the infrastructure costs are on me. So I have the server, the browsers, the datasets, but it's you who brings your agent. You could even call it bring your own agent sort of platform.
I especially build a lot of web agents for specific niche topics, which it might not be a correct idea, or it might not give a full evaluation against the publicly available generic benchmarks. So is there any way we can customize or bring our own data sets in the platform and test it?
Currently not, because I think evals can also be a very personal and private thing, in a sense that if your company is evaluating your agents on, very specific data formats, or, a sequence of steps that your engineers have designed, that is in a way your proprietary secret sauce, right? Because that's what makes your agent work. So if it's publicly available, somebody else can just copy it and train their agent against those constraints. But I would love to discuss it. If anybody has any sort of tests that they would like to bring onto the platform, whether it's private or public, I think it's a great way to grow the platform, because that is the main thing that people ask me, which is, hey, but I have this very specific thing that I want to test it on. How does that work? And that's where I want to draw a distinction, where I'm not trying to compete with companies like Braintrust, Arize, LangSmith, and all those other ones, which offer evals as a service. I think it's more interesting to explore the sort of agent and harness evaluations as a concept. and maybe move into it as a service where you can bring your own data sets and evaluate it as well.
Okay. I think there are a lot of evaluation frameworks, open source frameworks that are there in the market on how you can evaluate your agents or any AI application that you've built. So, for someone who has just started building agents,
Mhm.
who does not know about ClawBench or any products that is out there, if someone has to kind of evaluate their agents, where
Mhm.
do they start from?
I think you start off with a goal in mind. What are you trying to achieve? Is an agent necessary for it? If it is, then you define what's called success criteria. For example, let's say if you have an agent which classifies emails and answers them, you need to note down each step that the agent is required to take for something to be successful. Or for example, if it's a chatbot, okay, you want to sit down either with your subject matter expert. Let's say if you're building a medical chatbot, you want it to be accurate, safe, and all these criteria you just need to list. And then it's a question of bringing it to a tracing platform, right? And just collecting all those traces, right? I mean, ClawBench does it also. If you submit your agent, we generate the trace. And you want to collect data, right? It all comes down to data. If you collect these traces, the steps that an agent has taken, you can then see where is it failing. Once you identify the step at which it fails, you then, using your own hands and Claude Code, go on and fix that step, right? And it's a never-ending process because stuff always breaks with agents. It's just the nature of them. And yeah, that's the sort of unsexy truth. You just try to catch errors as they come and patch them.
Right. So, are there any open source frameworks that the beginners can look at while evaluating for evaluations?
Yeah, just off the top of my head, I think for tracing, a good one I would recommend is LangViews. But
Okay.
all the major ones, Arize, LangSmith, they all offer free tiers as well, which helps you trace and track the data. At the same time, nothing's stopping you from tracing it all yourself. There are frameworks like Harbor, which are more for benchmarking, but there's one for RAG I remember using, which is called RAGAS,
Mhm.
and PromptFoo, that's another one, which was
PromptFoo.
originally
Okay.
acquired by OpenAI, I think, which is capturing prompts. And let's say if you're building this medical chatbot and you want to see that in every response, the word, I don't know, peptides appears, you want it to flag. So for example, what PromptFoo allows you to do is to flag certain words, length, all these little parameters. Again, you can all do it in Python, but these libraries will give you the right idea of what is possible to track, right? And again, like I've said, you have the criteria, you can define them in code, and then you will just simply collect data of are these criteria being met or not.
So, how can someone who is building agents can reduce the cost of large language models that they are using? The token usage or token consumption,
Mhm.
how can someone optimize it?
Well, if we take the assumption that tokens are free, that's not true,
Mhm.
which is true. Yeah, it's a question of trying out, right? So you need to establish which model is good enough for your use case. You can brute force everything with Opus 4.7, but through API usage, it will cost you an arm and a leg, which I think maybe trying out models like Gemini, which are famously much cheaper than
Yes.
other ones, would be a good use case. Yeah, I mean, token optimization, as boring as it sounds, you just want to run it on a task, see how many tokens it has consumed, look into the stuff that always eats your context windows, which is like skills, MCP servers, which often pollute and bring unnecessary context. And then you want to be doing, I think, with web browsing especially, you want to be doing some web summarizing, right? Because all these massive chunks of, I don't know, a Wikipedia page, you don't want all of it to be passed on to, onto sequential steps. You want to be summarizing it, storing it in permanent memory, whether it's vector or something like WikiLLM by Karpathy, and then only pulling it when you need to again. I think that's good steps to get you started. Actually, it's on ClawBench website, but you can also find it on Hermes as a skill.
Okay.
And
Okay.
it's a concept by Karpathy where you use a software called Obsidian, which is a note-taking software
Okay.
to store any concept, or as I like to use it, as my dumping ground for random articles I find on Twitter or LinkedIn, where the LLM uses this skill to process the article, video, a blog that you've sent it as a entity on a knowledge graph. So Obsidian also works as a pseudo knowledge graph where it has nodes being connected. So let's say if I upload a blog about AI agents, it breaks it down into components, entities, article, and the next time you draw a adjacent blog or video, which is on a similar topic, it will then connect the two topics together and maybe draw a comparison. So it's a very useful way of, compacting large amounts of data into something which an LLM can then draw from with all the useful context that you have. So whether you're writing blogs, recording podcasts, or anything like that, I really like it because it's just too much information to go through otherwise. Hermes has a good native implementation of it, or you can find various GitHub repos which ship it as a skill. Skill, for anybody who doesn't know, is simply a format which an LLM can call to utilize a certain feature.
Right. So I think there are many people who are building their custom skills and everything. Do you think it's in a productivity personal space, or do you think it can be commercialized? The ability to create Claude skills.
Recently, I heard somebody's opinion that skills are like prompts, and it depends on what school of thought you subscribe to. If you think prompts and skills are as valuable as code, and if you think these things are proprietary as such. So the question becomes if I came up with this ultimate skill or prompt, which works really well, is it a commercial product, or is it just sort of something that anybody can replicate, right? I'm starting to lean towards an opinion that it doesn't matter as much now, because the topic of self-improving agents, which can write their own prompts, design their own tools, design their own skills, they can converge on the ultimate version of this skill if given the right task they can optimize for. So a fun fact, if anybody didn't know, is that whenever a new Anthropic model comes out, they rewrite the Claude Code prompt from scratch, right? They let another LLM optimize the model for performance, which means that they don't treat it like a proprietary piece of material. For them, it's more the process with which you can rebuild these prompts and skills.
Now, when you say Anthropic uses another LLM, so you mean another LLM from different companies or from their?
No, they would let the Claude Code itself maybe optimize an empty version of Claude Code, right? So they have an LLM which is very good at writing prompts for Claude Code.
All right. I've seen that you have recently posted about the leaked Claude Code internals paper. What is it about? Why is it important? And is there something cool that we can learn from it?
Yeah, it's for anybody who doesn't know, recently a team of researchers went through a repo which had the recently open sourced and then closed sourced again Claude Code. And if you look into it, a lot of it is just plumbing work. A lot of it is sort of if-else statements. It's the logic of how context gets treated by Claude Code. It's the logic of which tools to call when. A lot of it is I think originally was manually designed, sort of thinking about the user experience. And then I think as time went on, they now let Claude Code optimize itself, which is if you give it a range of tasks, whether it's benchmarks or their internal evals, you simply ask Claude Code to work on itself until it achieves the right sort of performance accuracy. So yeah, it's an interesting paper, but it just highlights that there's no magic sauce, right? A lot of it is simply these custom prompts. It's thinking about the design, the user experience, what works and what doesn't.
Okay. And you also mentioned something called self-improving agents. What are self-improving agents?
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm a reinforcement learning expert. I am aware of the concepts and what it serves in post-training, but it can be applied. This concept applies to both sort of non-RL methods and RL methods as well. And I'm specifically referring to the literature being released in the last couple of months. Papers like SkillOS by Google, MetaHarness, Autogenesis, which are all very interesting papers because what they propose is given an agent and a very specific task that it's evaluated against, you give an agent a range of tools and levers to pull. So for example, an agent has the ability to change its prompt, its tools, its environment, skills, and a few others. And every iteration, it can make one change, and then you see what the metric is. For example, has the accuracy improved? Has it decreased? And you let the agent pursue the most successful paths until it reaches the ultimate goal of, let's say, scoring 100%. By which point you have, let's say, 20 iterations of steps being changed. I would say the most popular version of this is Karpathy's AutoResearch, which focuses on can an LLM train GPT-2 from scratch, well, almost from scratch, from like a base template, and improve the validation bytes per token or something like that metric. So taking it from, let's say, 100% to as low as it can. And if you let it run for 24 hours with access to GPUs, it can retrain or train new layers of the model, add more layers, reduce context windows, tweak a sort of various parameters until it reaches the optimal state. All right. Through this experimentation, through almost sort of scientific discovery, trying out different paths to see what works. So if for anybody interested, I would recommend trying out those ones.
Okay. You also mentioned a lot about harness engineering. Let's define harness engineering as simple as possible, and let's talk why harness engineering is important right now and how people can use it.
Of course. I think harness engineering is a very nice topic to bring this episode together, right? Because I think if you're an aspiring AI engineer or anybody who's interested in working with AI, your easiest and most accessible tools to bring the most leverage to your work, to your company, to anything you're doing is thinking about harness engineering as a system and what is possible to change to satisfy the success criteria that you have, how to make the most efficient coding agent, how to, let's say, make the best chatbot or anything like that. So harness engineering is what, for example, defines what Claude Code is, right? Which is something which is on top of the model and is defined usually by the tools, the skills, the environment that it's in. As we've discussed previously, the Claude Code paper is 90% harness engineering, 90% sort of if-else statements, how memory gets handled, how how context gets compacted, all those sort of stuff. And you as an engineer can change the prompts and the skills to, let's say, tweak the behavior very easily without having to touch the model. So I think for anybody starting off, that's a great way of looking into what are the changes that I can make to a system? How can I even change the way Codex behaves and to achieve better results? Maybe Codex out of the box isn't working for me. Let me try adding a few skills and playing around with it. That's harness engineering. And that's where I think the industry is moving as well.
All right. I have recently also heard something called context engineering as well.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
how close are harness engineering and context engineering? And what is context engineering, if you have any idea about it?
Yeah, of course. Context engineering was the next term from prompt engineering, which I think where the AI industry peaked is when you had job titles of being a prompt engineer.
Prompt.
I think of that often. I'm like, I introduce myself as a prompt engineer sometimes. I get a few
Really?
laughs. Yeah. I'm a senior prompt engineer.
Right.
Yeah, and the context engineering is the sort of the next part. It is the next abstraction that you're thinking of. You're not just thinking about how do I make this model, what do I say to this model for it to behave correctly, right? To stop saying stuff that I don't care about. It's more about how do I give just the right information to the model, save model when it's reaching its context window limit, and how do I manage this input and output from a model? So that's another big part of harness engineering, right? It's almost like it has evolved from prompt engineering, sort of very low level thinking, into higher and higher abstractions where you're not just managing the prompt, you're not just managing the context, the inputs and outputs. You're now managing a system as a whole. And slowly we're going towards how do you manage the loop in which this whole thing operates, right? Which is not just about going in manually and making a few changes. It's about how do you add the right verification so that the agent can then check itself, right? And make adjustments itself. That's, I think, the most valuable skill of 2026, 2027.
That's cool. Yeah. But there are a lot of terms and tools that keep coming up in the industry on a daily basis. It's pretty difficult to keep track of what tool to learn, what tool to kind of experiment with. All these
Mm-hmm.
companies are like one-upping each other on the performance of their models and everything, and new terms keep on popping up on a daily basis. So how do you keep track of all this, and how does one should keep track of all this?
I'll be honest, I can't keep track of everything.
Yeah.
Every time I log in on X and I see 5 new frameworks, 5 new updates, you know, if you really like the field, you're going to spend all your time looking into new things, trying them out, which I think is one of the best ways you can grow, which is like, okay, let me just spin up DeepSeek and play around with it. Let me just plug DeepSeek into OpenClaw, this new thing I've heard about, and see how well it performs. That's my advice, is just pick something and just try it out. But yeah, to circle back to that WikiLLM skill, that's been a massive upgrade to my sort of knowledge retention, which is whenever I see something, I'll skim it, I'll send it to my knowledge base. And then let's say if I want to write a blog about it or some piece of content, I can then draw from that knowledge base and come up with something as an initial sketch. But it does not mean that you can skip reading papers. You still have to. You still have to sort of dig into it, understand why they're doing it. We haven't abstracted that part yet. Yeah, we just have to read it.
People keep on asking me in my family and friends and everyone, like how do you keep track of all this, and how I experiment a lot as well. Like you
Mhm,
do, I also experiment and know whether this works for me or whether I can use this in my job or in any kind of workflow that I'm working on. I guess that hunger to learn and kind of upskilling,
mhm,
I don't know. I think that's pretty important these days. If you cannot upskill and if you don't have that drive to learn, then
mhm.
it's pretty hard to keep up.
True. If you really are interested, then it's super easy because you're just going to absorb as much everything that comes in. But be careful of filtering out noise. You don't have to try out every single framework. You
Yeah.
just have to know why this framework exists and maybe try out one of each category. Don't have to try out every single one.
how can we learn about AI? So what's that beginner kind of course or anything that people can learn who is kind of starting out in this AI space and want to progress?
It's a good question. It depends how much you want to get into. I've been trying to convince my dad to use ChatGPT,
Yeah,
and he's like, "Man, just pick it up. Just
yeah,
type something in."
yeah,
But he keeps telling me I don't have a use case.
yeah,
So that brings me to the next point. If you have
yeah,
a use case, see if ChatGPT can help you. Because, the statistics are, maybe not the most transparent. They say like only 20% of the population of Earth have used AI tools. And I think of that, a very smaller fraction have used sort of agentic tools. But I think digital marketing, I used to work in an agency where the way people utilized AI there was sharing prompts. It could be as simple as that. It also makes you think in terms of systems. When you're trying to describe the output that you want using a prompt, it makes you think and reflect exactly what are you trying to achieve. It's actually very impressive how completely non-technical people, I remember at the event, the girl before me,
yeah,
completely non-technical, but picked up Zapier, picked up a
yeah,
few tools, managed to
yeah,
sort of make a few apps
yeah,
without having to be overly into Python and syntax,
correct.
anything like
Yeah,
that. It's more about if you can imagine what is it that you want, it's super easy to get you started. So it's actually been really encouraging to see people from non-techie backgrounds just pick something up like Replit or Codex and get something going and just got a demo. And sometimes it's actually a really nice demo. And you're saying, wow, now I feel threatened. I
yeah,
thought AI is going to replace me, but it's
yeah.
actually marketing analysts.
Yeah. I was also surprised to see
Mhm,
for a person who does not understand code or does not have a computer science background
mhm,
and to create not only one app, to
mhm,
create multiple apps for different use cases
mhm,
and to understand like the no code low code tools that are out there,
mhm,
Zapier, I think there are many, Zapier, make.com, n8n,
mhm, mhm,
but I mean, before Claude Code and Chat GPTs of the world, non-tech people would never look or kind of dare to build an application. It's so easy now these
mhm,
days to spin up any kind of application if you have a use case.
mhm,
I think for all the non-technical folks who are watching this, all you need is like the hunger to learn and just spin up
mhm,
something using your chat gpt or Claude, and it
mhm.
will guide you the steps and you can just build an app. That's how easy it is these days.
Exactly. As simple as that. And don't worry about anything else. Just get a shiny demo out and appreciate it. But yeah, exactly what you said. Just try it out. You know, coding became such a much more pleasurable activity and building stuff since the release of coding tools. Because
Yeah.
the amount of times I had syntax errors,
Oh
import
my god.
errors, and I would just get stuck and you
Yeah.
start questioning yourself. And now it's just simple as that. You just get something going and it's beautiful. I think that's why everyone is working more now than they used to. So AI is not saving anybody any time. It's that everyone's just obsessing with token maxing and be like, what else can I make? What else can I make? So it's a very creative process as well. So it's not just a numbers game. It's also about what can you imagine with your mind.
And also I actually had few conversations with people in our events as well, right?
Mhm,
um, the building applications, building software has never been easy.
mhm,
It has gotten super easy these days. So coding skill is not a great or unique skill right now. I mean,
mhm,
AI can do that, uh, but selling what someone has built is
mhm,
a great skill. I mean,
mhm.
selling
Yes.
the AI application, selling SaaS products, the ability to sell,
Mhm,
because people have been creating stuff left and right. People have been shipping like crazy, iterating like crazy, but not
mhm,
every AI startup and AI application has been successful. right?
Mm-hmm.
Even though the building AI applications has been easy. I think those skills will not be replaceable just yet. Maybe sometime in the future, we don't know, but just yet, I think those are very important skills to have. What do you think?
Exactly. Distribution is the moat. If you sort of browse building communities, it is becoming the bottleneck. If there is, 1,000 submissions to App Store every day with an app, and your identity and your distribution channels are identical to everyone else, there's going to be a very low chance of you standing out. But if you look at very successful startups and personalities, there's one called Cluely. He built a whole brand of characters on YouTube. He built this brand. And I think that's part of the reasons why he's so successful. Or guys making sort of, short video formats for YouTube and Instagram and Twitter who can stand out. And that's what propels them to popularity, where they can actually build something. So that's why another piece of advice for anyone is building in public is great, right? So you just document every day what you build and you post it on LinkedIn, post it on X so that everyone can see. Because to be completely honest, very few people will actually care about the product at that stage, but you get early feedback and you get a few ideas and you get people's eyes on you. And it's yesterday I went to Data Science Festival and a friend of mine who I haven't seen for a while said, "Hey, you're still building in public, aren't you? How's that going?" And I was like, "Yes, I guess I am." So somebody actually does check those. So I would highly recommend just little steps.
Yeah.
You kind of have to put yourself out there.
That's for sure. I mean, building distribution for yourself, putting yourself out, building applications or building stuff in public will help in this AI world, I think, because just shipping and building in private will not get you anywhere.
It's funny how they made all the sort of introverted, techie coding people. Now you have to put yourself out there. So I think it's the great migration of sort of priorities in life for founders is going from sort of head down in the computer to actually have to get myself out there, because otherwise it's very tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. All right. That's all I have from my side. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you, learn from you.
This hour just flew by completely. It was really nice to sort of chat to you. Very nice questions. I covered lots of ground. If anybody finds this useful, I think my day will be a success.
Yeah.
But yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions. If anybody has them, check out ClawBench. Let me know what you think of it. Maybe it's a crap idea. Let me know.